So just to recap on last week, the last 2 weeks, I've been going through some of the training that we've been preparing, and this training talks about how do we unify the governance. So there's lots of almost different directions that people are going in. We've got data governance that's been there. Now we've got this whole new AI governance. We've got records management. And I think certainly Mario and I are finding that, when you put together AI systems, the requirement to do all of the governance, both data and records management and the AI governance, you need to consider all of these things, and especially when you deal with things like chatbots and human in the loop, where they are collecting records. They would collect, for example, an OCR of an accident or a theft or an image, and that is a record that's been stored. And in the conversation that this chatbot is having with the claimant, we also have to be very aware of the fact that if the chatbot provides wrong advice, they have a route to claim against, to be able to say, but you told me that, or you said it was like this. And Meryl Albers did a great job of explaining the challenge that one of the organizations, I think it was one of the airways, had when they promised certain bereavement fees, and it wasn't given, and was taken to court, and they lost. So this whole idea of being able to manage all of this content, data, unstructured data, semi-structured, tacit knowledge that we're getting, we need to bring this all together. Now, we've used this process called basically insurance claim process automation. So how do we automate this process? There's lots and lots of different things that are happening. FNOL stands for the first notice of loss. So this is where we are wanting to discuss the use of chatbots to take in the information about the claim, to guide the person submitting the claim to collect all the right data, and then to start saying, we don't understand exactly what you said here, or provide us more information here. That's what the first, the FNOL stands for. And I'm sure when you see Mario do the presentation on some of the challenges around chatbots in AI and the regulations, you'll see how complicated it is. I've moved a little bit further on in terms of the claims processing or detection, anomaly detection, and handling this triage of things that are going on. And so I'm going to hand over to Mario to do this, take the section on FNOL, and then I'll come back and show you some of the claim processing. And this is what I'm really interested to show you as to how we can uplift the quality of data, and how our data stewards need to get involved with understanding what is an anomaly and what is normal. Okay, so that normalization, detecting an anomaly, saying this is bad, and then almost going to what we call a human in the loop. How do we bring, if the decision goes into an anomalous claim, you can't just say it's out, this is fraudulent. You have to go to a human. The human has to understand, why is this an anomaly? Why did this Python code or these different algorithms detect an anomaly, and can it be explained? And that's quite exciting from a data quality point of view, because we always battled with this concept of reasonableness, and this is what anomaly detection is. But I don't want to spend too much time there. I know that Mario's got quite a few presentation decks to go through. So Mario, all yours.
Thank you, Howard. And what I suggest here is I will start with the perspective of AI governance framework and dive into where and how the specificities of FNOL and how the specificities of a chatbot, should influence how you decide to do governance. So let me start, with some element of framework, and then I'll dive into more detail here. Give me a second. Okay.
We can see it.
Yes, deep dive. Thank you. All right. So the perspective of an organization, saying we've got different business objective, and we consider different AI use cases. We understand that, and Howard gave the context where, in the context of insurance company, automated claim process, might be one of the use cases you decide to target. Now, organization would say, well, let's build automated claim component and a system within the organization. Let's develop or buy a system, and we'll get the business value here. Now, here's the perspective. 95% of organizations get zero return on Gen AI investment. This is a report from MIT from last week. So what does it mean here is, if an organization decide to build, a FNOL capabilities and build, element of chatbot regarding specific use cases, there are multiple challenges that needs to be addressed. So what are these challenges? Well, quality. Okay, you need to make sure the quality is being addressed. Explainability in some cases, sovereignty of data, risk mitigation. Here's the perspective. Whatever the use case you select, there are many facets that needs to be considered. So what are these facets? So from an organization perspective, you want to do AI, you understand you need to govern AI, but there's so many facets of AI governance. So what does it mean? How do you approach this in a structured way? Here's a proposal as a structured way. And there's a lot of detail here, but the core components that should be read from this slide here is that AI governance is made of 6 pillars. You need AI frameworks, data operation, risk management, cybersecurity, ethics and privacy, system and model. So what's the key message here? One of the key messages here is that data operation is a fundamental part of AI governance. It's not something else. And that's a fundamental approach to ensure data management within organization is connected to AI. So it's not what's the connection between data governance and AI governance. What this says is that data operation, data management, governance of data is a fundamental prerequisite of succeeding in doing an AI. That's one of the key aspects here. And this in different organizations is really helpful for a data management organization that struggle to demonstrate it delivers value. So that perspective is quite fundamental. It's possible to align data management activities and focus on how and what's required to succeed in AI governance. So this perspective here is about the different pillar of AI governance. The other perspective is that governance needs to be applied throughout the AI lifecycle. So when you want to govern AI, you need to consider, when can AI be done? You need to govern that aspect within the organization. You might need to govern AI procurement. When can you buy AI? What are the contractual requirements? What are the obligations? That requires a specific governance focus. Governing AI adoption, AI design. You want to build AI solution. What are the governance requirements? in the design? What are the governance requirements in the deployment? What are the governance requirements in the operation? So the framework you see here is the result of the work that Howard and I have been doing, looking at many frameworks. You come to the understanding that many facets must be orchestrated and that governance cannot be managed in silos. Okay, all these governance facets must be orchestrated. If not, the resulting, and you've seen in the previous slide, 95% of Gen AI initiatives, fail. Why is that? Okay, you need to consider the different facets and understand how you're going to approach these different facets, and most importantly, what's relevant for your organization. You don't need everything. That's the good news. You don't need all of this to succeed. You just need to identify what is required and what's important in your organization. From the perspective of framework, all these silos, all these pillars of a governance framework, data management, many of them will come with the specific element of frameworks. Some different ISO framework, ISO 42001 that Howard has covered in the previous session, ISO 5259 about data quality for analytic and ML. Different framework will apply in different pillars. So the idea is not only you need to consider different pillars, you need to consider the different frameworks, the different laws and policies and standards, and how they apply through that frameworks. So the idea is you're looking at this and you say, well, that's a lot for certain. Okay, you look at this and say, I just want to, there's a business opportunity in our organization to create a chatbot and gain value. And looking at all of this, and the idea is, in many organizations, it provoke, induce stagnation. There's too much. So where do you start? What are the governance components that you need to succeed? Okay, so it depends, and that's the idea here. The governance requirement, you've looked at the framework, the components that are critical to your success depends on which exact use case are you targeting. So it means if you're building FNOL capabilities and using and creating, implementing chatbot facility to support FNOL, the governance requirements there are specific to a chatbot. They're different that if you're doing, fraud detection on a structured database. The governance requirement depends on your AI priorities. So you don't need everything. That's probably your first input as to which governance aspects are the most important. It depends on what you want to do. You need to consider the type, the technique that you're going to use, and you need to understand and assess the nature of these specificities. That's a key element. The second element is risk tolerance. Well, if you're a financial institution and you consider that the AI technique you're about to deploy might induce, false positive in client, okay? And you're saying, well, no, false positive in client, that's a big no. Okay, you're in a financial organization, and that exposed you to the risk of sending information to the wrong client. That would be disastrous. So risk tolerance also indicate, well, if your tolerance to certain risk is very low, it means that certain governance aspects are more important. You need to consider your tolerance to risk to determine which governance aspect is the most important. Third aspect is compliance context. If you're in the context of India and you're submitted to a DPDPA on privacy requirement, okay, you need to consider how DPDPA or GDPR in the Europe or CCPA in the California, how these privacy requirements will impact the chatbot you're about to create. So your compliance context is also an input about what's needed, which governance requirements are the most important to succeed. Compliance context is definitely an important one. Existing capabilities. So if you're just starting in the AI journey, okay, you probably will not and should not be dependent on all governance capability to be fully deployed. So what that means is, even on the governance facet, you start small. If you have low capability, if you're starting in the journey, there are certain aspects of governance that are more prerequisite to others. So start with the ones that are adequate and are adapted to your existing capabilities. If you've done a DCAM assessment and you have scores on different sub-capabilities, these scores should inform you about your capability to govern, and you should adjust the governance intensity as your governance and maturity grows. So it depends on the project. So let's say go back to, yes, Howard.
Yes, sorry, Mario, if you go one slide back, from what you've been saying, it's, you think of how many projects get started without considering any of these things. Just, it seems like a good idea, and we can reduce the number of people that are doing the claim process. So it's very tempting to just jump in. And I suppose when you look at some of these things, and maybe you're not in a bank or something else where you don't have that high level of compliance and risk, you may be very tempted just to start. And I'm sure that's without ignoring your capabilities and without having a map, you can really go down a path, and maybe you have initial success, but you can find yourself getting into challenges down the road. And I know you've been talking to many organizations about false starts and not getting it going and going around in circles, but it really seems a difficult place to get going. And if you considering all of the frameworks that you've suggested, I mean, how many of us know one of the frameworks? I suppose if you're a lawyer and you've got the AI Act, and then you probably know that. But all of them, that's a really big ask.
And your point, Howard, is probably the most important one. There's a spectrum where on one side you've got all the framework, all the risk, all the compliance requirement, that must be considered. And at the other end of the framework of the spectrum is just the idea of let's just do it and see what happens. Now, the idea is, if you just go to let's do it and see what happens, you're probably bound to fail. Okay, so there's a point you need to set. And the point is most toward let's just go in and see what happens. Okay,
Yeah.
You don't need to consider and put in place all the framework in order to go. The real point here is that what's the minimum set of element you need to put in place to reach your first objective? That's the real question. So in order to make that decision, you need to know the parameter and what needs to be considered. If you don't consider, certain risk, which will be a showstopper for stakeholder to, approve the go to production of the AI system. If you don't consider it upfront and you don't do the minimum to address these elements, then you're bound to fail. So I think looking at the framework you just saw, the idea is to really identifying where do you start, what's the minimum needed to succeed in the first, iteration and first steps.
Right.
And that's the core element, because again, if you say, well, we need to consider everything and put the framework in place before we start, then everything's going to freeze. You're not going to move forward and not get even the chance to demonstrate the value of the AI system.
Great. I mean, I know you showed me yesterday or the day before all the complexities of just looking after a chatbot and all the regulations, and that document in itself seems quite scary in terms of what needs to be done. I wonder, Mario, if you could maybe just show them quickly what the sort of policies are around the chatbot, or I don't know whether I'm distracting you. Sorry.
No, absolutely. So where that fits is that if you're looking at FNOL and the idea of a chatbot here, I mean the governance requirement here on how do you develop a chatbot, that can be very extensive. There's one framework that exists. It's actually a survey of all framework. It's been done by the Peking University. I'll show you a glimpse of what that is for you to see the nature and the intensity of these requirements. Give me a second here. I did not. Oops. Give me a second here. Oops. I'll need to come back to that specific aspect
Okay.
after.
Okay.
Let's see it here. Give me a second here. Compliance playbook. So, as an example of when you're creating a chatbot, what are the requirements that needs to be addressed? So this document is actually, it's been created by the Peking University and in collaboration with US University. They consider, when you create a chatbot, what do you need to address when you specifically create a chatbot? And they consider, data safety perspective. And they're saying, well, you need to consider, pre-training data safety. And you need to consider, whenever you pre-train data in order to create a chatbot, what are all the different considerations when you pre-train element of data? So for example, here, data filtering for pre-trained safety, you need to apply different techniques when you filter data. What does that mean? Basically, it means you need to make sure you remove undesirable content from the data being used to train your chatbot system. And there are different mechanisms and different techniques used to do this. And you need, from an organization perspective, how do you make sure, if you're training your chatbot system based on publicly available data, how do you make sure that private content is removed, from the training data? How do you make sure that unsafe domain are not considered in the training data? How, from an organization perspective, you define which domain should be excluded here? And this perspective is just, one aspect of the element that you need to consider when you create chatbot. You need to make sure filtered data set, you filter the input data set in a way where undesirable content will be done. And there are many techniques to do this, okay? You might want to make sure that, for example, you're going to block certain domain. This perspective about model-based filtering is making sure you're going to induce deduplication in the content. So any content that might appear multiple times will induce a focus of the chatbot on these duplicated content. So many techniques must be applied, and which technique is required, to which extent you need to go. This cannot be a technical decision. So you need implication of stewardship perspective. You need to understand what's needed and to what extent, and what's the tolerance of the organization in doing this. Another facet of LLM safety is going to be about, LLM safety perspective. So what it means it is possible that the chatbot system you're going to develop might induce deception with the user. So what are the available techniques to make sure deception is measured, and what are the techniques that exist to make sure model deception is being addressed adequately. And again, this cannot be the responsibility of data steward to, here's a model, it's good. The extent to which you want to go depend on the context, depend on your tolerance to bad things happening in the specific context. So I guess here what I wanted to show is that even for a specific AI technique like chatbot, there are different frameworks that apply to the development of a chatbot, and you need to consider the nature of these requirements.
Right. And just before I go to Adam, I think what's important here, just to show the people, is what your tool is doing, what Prodago is doing is bringing in all of these different frameworks and then allowing to associate actions and work that needs to be done that align with what these frameworks are telling us to do. Is that correct in a very simplified version? So you're almost keeping the guardrails in terms of what practices we need to do to be able to ensure that we're doing it properly. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So you see here, you have a complex framework, a lot of technical requirement or less technical requirement. The idea is translating framework into tangible actions, that can be executed. Here, the action is you need to remove undesirable content before training. This is something you can put in the project plan. Okay. So what the tool is doing, and I'll come back to more, a use case within the tool, but yes, exactly how certain framework like this one requires orchestration, because this is one of many. Again, on one side you might have a GDPR, on the other side you have a chatbot technical requirement. How do you combine all of this to make sure the strict minimum but critical requirements are addressed in your project? So it's all about that. It's all about identifying for all these framework what is critical to succeed, and based on your risk tolerance, which element are fundamental to being addressed in your organization.
Thanks, Mario. Yes, Adam.
Sorry, just running to let my dog in. Good framework, conditions and rules laid out there. Maria, thank you for them. I do question a couple of aspects. One being, how are you going to prove the transparency of them? They got the transcripts from it, and the chatbot was encouraging and suggesting ways, and suggesting that yes, this was the correct course of action. This was the right thing to do.
Yeah. I think two facets of your question. First, how are you going, you're creating a new AI system. How are you going to demonstrate that all these things have been done? How are you going to reassure the stakeholder that risk have been mitigated, compliance is assured? The point, and Howard brought this in the previous session, it's artifacts. Okay, it must be evidence-based trust. So you need to identify which artifact needs to be produced by the initiative to demonstrate that things have been addressed. So here, if you're saying to a project, remove undesirable content before training, you might need to ask the project, demonstrate that you've done this, demonstrate that the activity has been executed, but you might also ask for evidence and show the list of domain that has been blocked, show the exercise of masking of personal information in the training data set. So evidence, okay, and
Mhm.
producing artifact in the context of project, and using the artifact as a gating requirement is a very pragmatic and simple way. Now, how many of these elements? Well, this is where it depends. Okay, it depends on the context, on the type of data, but artifact and evidence is a very tangible way to make evidence-based decision or techniques. Now, if you look at the framework like that one, in order to address things like this, first, what you see then, this is a very recent study, it's about 100 pages long. What it shows, what it tells you is that the technology to be 100% reassured about that, they do not exist. Okay, there's a lot of research to make sure this happens. Now, the current method to do this, there are different technology method that to do this. For example, you might train your system on things you want to avoid. Okay, you might identify these deceptive usage of or deceptive behavior of the system, and you might train your system on these behavior you want to avoid and tag them as things to avoid. So training on things to be avoided and tagging these training as things to be avoided. This is one of the area of management and the development of chatbot that's being used, meaning identifying a specific training and behavior. The more recent technology involve actually using AI and trying to align chatbot behavior on policy parameters. Okay, so in the previous years, chatbot training was more trying to fix things one at a time. The more recent development in that perspective involve defining parameters and training AI specifically on these parameters, and using AI actually to challenge an existing chatbot on the alignment to parameters. So I guess my point here is that the capability and making sure a chatbot would not induce, violent behavior or response, inappropriate response, or addressing things like, tell me how to make a bomb. What are the existing techniques to make sure this type of response is not being addressed? So, it goes into a lot of detail about if someone asks, how to make a bomb. First, you could say, well, that type of questioning, you should not provide an answer or on top of this. You could say on top of this and train the system to say, not only, you don't provide an answer, pointing toward the usage of medical services and assistance to that topic.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mario, but I'm sure now that we've chosen that this chatbot is going to focus on first notice of loss, basically anything outside of that, it needs to have the guardrails and not to go down those discussions, right? So it's not an open case. It's a very specialized business case that the chatbot needs to respond to. But I think we may go down quite far. I think if we can come back to your presentation. Sorry,
Yes, absolutely. And what I was presenting here, and if we go on technology, I've shown a framework, an AI governance framework. I've shown that you need to consider many aspects. The platform that Prodago is bringing. Let me go to this here. So what we're bringing with Prodago is we've created a platform basically where we have different playbooks. So playbooks where we take GDPR and we say, what are the requirements from GDPR? You just saw like LLM safety playbook. Now ISO 42001. So we created playbooks for different framework, and the platform I've shown you is a platform where you would look at the framework, you would consider risk aspect, and basically make sure that when there's an AI project, there's a plan of activity and we collect evidence. That's the point here, your question, Adam, about how do you make sure? Well, you need to make sure when there's an AI initiative that create a system, they know what needs to be done. You need to keep this to, not too much, but you request evidence, and the trust will come from the evidence that are provided here. The way it works in the Prodago platform, give me just a second here, I'll switch to a demo environment. So for example, one of the framework that needs to be addressed is ISO 42001. So ISO 42001, talks about basically putting in place what they call an AI management system, which is basically the overarching framework above the production of AI system. Doesn't tell you how to develop AI system. It tells you about the management system you need to put in place. So here what you see is ISO 42001, and ISO 42001 is going to talk and tell you that you need to implement and you need to develop an AI policy. So what we do here is, again, as I would present, we take framework and we identify what does that mean? What's the tangible action that needs to be done? You need to define a policy for the development and use of AI system. That's it. That's the component that needs to be developed. Now, this type of component here you see is a requirement of ISO. If we go to other ISO requirement, ISO requirement might ask you to assess impact of AI system. So what we do here in Prodago is we, again, read the statement, identify what needs to be done. You need to assess potential impact of AI, of harm from the development provision of AI system. So this notion of translating framework into tangible action is the key to identify the minimum requirement you need to address. Okay, so what you see here is translation between different frameworks into tangible action. Here, assess potential impact. That's the activity that needs to be done. Now, an artifact needs to be produced. Here's the artifact. Okay, and the work we're doing with Howard is creating the templates on how to do this. The idea is to simplify the process. You're creating a new system. Here's the artifact you need to produce. You need to produce a probability severity of harm assessment. Here's the template on how to do this. So the platform you're seeing here is actually orchestrating all these framework. This is ISO. You can include the GDPR security framework, DCAM framework, DMBOK framework. Consider playbook like this. And the idea is when there's an AI project, you basically, this would be about a fraud detection prevention system. The idea is a questionnaire. What are what's the context of the project? What is it about, where the data is going to come from, existing level of quality, model characteristic, and to automatically identify the list of activities that needs to be done. So everything we've presented and through our presentation is that AI governance is managed and framed, through different laws and regulation and framework and standard. Now it quickly becomes overwhelming. So what we're showing you here is that if you have playbooks for the different framework, the idea is to simplify the process for a project. And that's the key here. If every time you create, a new AI system, you need to consider everything and all the framework, nothing's going to move. So the idea is how you simplify the process. So the playbook and the OPs that you're seeing here, the idea is to make it simple. In a project, you answer a questionnaire, and here's the list of things you need to do. Assess potential impact is one of the consideration. And you need to do this as per the requirement of, ISO. ISO is asking you to do this. By the way, NIST is also asking you to do this. The idea is not to bring this complexity of framework to the project, okay, to keep it at the management level and to simplify the process. This is how to bring minimal requirements to the context of initiative. And if you create, a chatbot for FNOL, how do you determine that minimum set of requirement that needs to be addressed to actually not be in the 95% of initiative that doesn't make it to production? Yes, Howard.
Yeah, so what I think, and the nice thing I see with this is you go through a questionnaire, you get all the data elements or the data requirements or what the person's trying to do. You then you suggest a set of operational procedures that should be followed as part of the project, and then you can map those operational procedures to different frameworks. So I don't need to worry about the framework, you doing that. But then when the evidence is submitted, are you almost telling us that we in compliance, we've done this, this, and this, and now we can see what we've achieved and what we haven't done and what we're outstanding? Is that something that you can show us at the end of the project? Of course, you're helping us understand what we need to do, so you're not asking us to read all the frameworks. You're guiding us through operational procedures that will achieve the frameworks in the background.
Absolutely. So the operating practices, tells you in your initiative, here's the list of things you need to do because of these framework that requires it and the certain risk. Now, in the end, for the project, again, it must be simple. Here's the list of things you need to do, and here's the list of evidence you need to provide. So you see here a list of authoritative source, identify critical data, assessment, probability, severity of harm. What you're seeing here is that here's a list of evidence that needs to be produced through the different project phases. And the idea is that the trust in the system being delivered will be reflected by the percentage of artifacts that are approved. So this becomes evidence-based governance. So you first make sure you identify the minimum set of things that needs to be done in a project, and you collect the evidence to be reassured that it has been done. And that becomes your key element, your key driver to ensure trust. And if in an organization, you collect these elements from a project, then the next step is just to make sure they are approved by the right person. But if they are approved, then this is what makes the AI system that's been developed trusted, because you have evidence-based, artifacts that demonstrate that the right activities has been done. There's a proof, there's a trace. You can actually, in many organizations, this becomes a gating requirement before the system go to production, demonstrate that the evidence has been produced.
Good. And then there's a question from Eric. He's saying, Mario, do you have an integration with agentic frameworks like N8N to automate the execution of the frameworks, both in terms of creating the required artifacts as well as scheduling and monitoring to access and evaluate the items?
So the Prodago platform, as I've presented, is the orchestration layer. So what does that mean here? If I go to activities, when we say, document provenance of business term in the lab, okay, you need to document in the lab context the business term being used. Now, or let's go to the this other one. You need to document AI case in inventory. So you see, this is an activity that needs to be done. This activity, we're telling the project, do this in purview. So we're the level above the different technology. Okay. So if one activity must be executed in purview, okay, about metadata requirement and collection. Well, we can tell the project this activity is done in Purview. If this other activity about bias management implies another technology, we orchestrate the different requirements and point to the different technology where they are executed. So that bridge here, can be a link to Purview or to Colibra or CDGC from Informatica, depending on what you have. So you're not bounded by the technology. You're the orchestration layer above. If you don't have, in that case, Purview, and you're using Excel, well, so be it. Okay, it doesn't stop you from doing the activity. You can evolve the mechanism as you buy the technology. And if the technology you use to identify bias change over time, then you just point to the new technology. What you're showing here is the orchestration layer. Yes, Howard.
So you're really orchestrating the governance and getting the people to go and do the work in whichever technology they have, like N8N, then bring the evidence that it's been done and attach it as an artifact to the operational play, the playbook element. You're not, you as Prodago, you're not actually doing the actual documentation or the survey. You're getting the project team to do it, right?
Yes. In the same way, we don't do a PIA, privacy impact assessment, but we might tell the project to do it, and they might do it in OneTrust. The idea is there are so many technical pieces, okay, where if you don't orchestrate, you're not able to know what needs to be done, where and in which cases. This is where the gaps will hurt the success of the initiative. So we don't connect to the data or the model. We orchestrate the activity and point to the technology where they are executed.
Eric, does that answer your question?
Yes, I think to some extent. Now, my thoughts were, whatever descriptions we have here, I could have an agentic framework which can also execute that, because you do give instructions what is to be done. So if I were to connect third-party tools to such an agent network, which is then playing different roles, it could execute that and it could do that documentation. Now, the benefit I'm looking for is repetition and control over time, because it would be expensive and tedious to have humans re-execute this on a monthly basis when a new release comes out, if there is a violation that has creeped in through change. Whereas if I can put this into, again, an agentic framework that can be executed, that thing just runs overnight and can ensure that all the checkpoints are met, or it will find a violation.
And that many of these elements, and you're right, can be automated, specifically if they relate to the specific model itself and the characteristic of the model. Where it hurts, it's about you need to do an assessment of the possible harm of the system on people and the planet, and without this, you lack reassuring and trusted, and you need to demonstrate that this assessment is in line with your internal policies and directive. So the point is, many of these elements, you're right, must and should be, and it could be automated, and you do this as much as you can. The idea is many of these elements, when they're not automated, you still need to do them. And what do you do until you have the capability? The idea is to define the journey toward full automation. But even a PIA, for example, okay, you need to execute and structure a PIA, and this is a fundamental evidence of your initiative. Where does it fit? Certain element automated, other not automated, but you still need a full overarching picture.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Adam?
Yes, just a couple of questions, and I apologize if they may have been answered before I joined, as I joined a little late. So the platform that you've got, how much of these activities, project-based activities or activities list are out of the box?
So Adam, to
yeah.
help answer that, and that's where I'm getting involved, is I've brought a lot of the activities from the DMBOK. Now, of course, all these other frameworks, they do require other activities, but what Mario's done, which is very helpful, is to connect them to common OPs or operational procedures, and those operational procedures produce artifacts. So I've taken all of the DMBOK artifacts. Here we can see in data quality, and I've created standard templates and a metadata model for all of these things. So that's what I bring to Mario. I'm trying to help Mario by bringing in a standard of metadata templates. Now, I did a lot of this for the NDMO with their 15 domains. We defined templates for every single submission, and we spent a lot of time doing that. And that almost guides people of saying, this is the information that artifact needs to come back with, and this is how that artifact can be evaluated and scored as to whether it's a high quality artifact. Mario, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
No, absolutely. So in the platform, we've got something like 3,000 predefined operating practices, and for many of these operating practices, as Howard mentioned, we have artifact and templates to accelerate and implement operationalize these components. So that's the knowledge base of the platform. You see operating practices covering many topics. Quality management is certainly a topic where we have many of these activities. So when you say, you need to define a data quality management strategy, we've got a vast inventory of these predefined components, and we know that DCAM and DMBOK relate to that point. We also know that element of BCBS 239 principle 27 is also asking for this. So we've got a vast list of these predefined operating practices, and they become the raw material, the real tangible action, that on which you need to act to actually govern.
And just to bring that back, Mario, to the AI discussion. So a lot of your OPs will be related to AI techniques, and you would say, okay, for this AI use case, these are some of the AI techniques that can be used, like anomaly detection or risk scoring or things like that. And one can piece together the types of work that needs to be done, or operational procedures that need to be created. Adam, I don't know if that's making sense.
It does. Yes. That answers a lot of that. So basically, a lot of this is all straight out of the box, but it's also, you can also add to it, or
definitely
tweak and adjust as per
100%.
your unique situation.
So we had on the NDMO, we had something like I think Paul Bolton's on the line. I think there was something like 600 templates. We had to define metadata for each of those templates that get submitted, and so we've used a lot of that thinking and a lot of that design, the meta model, to bring it in here and start defining artifacts. But all artifacts need a scorecard in terms of how do we evaluate that artifact, and how do we check that it's done a good job, or do we just submit it and say, wow, that's fantastic, well done, you got a submission.
Exactly. That was the other thing, is the scoring determination on them.
Yeah.
One question I would ask is there the ability to get hands-on training with the software?
Yes. So hands-on training, certainly. And Howard and I are collaborating in different business contexts. For example, Howard, I'll let you talk about the training on AI governance, insurance aspect.
So we're just going to start a training next month, Adam, for MetLife. They've got several governance areas, and they're asking for.
Coincidentally, I've worked with MetLife, so I know a lot of the people at MetLife. I mean, at least in the offices here in North Carolina.
We're doing it in India. There's a MetLife area in India, but I think Eric's been waiting for a long time. Eric, yes, sir.
All good, thank you. Well, I think the real value is in the encoding that you've done here, because that are really the proof points, and 2,600 something items. I don't want to see this executed manually, because that's again the pitfall we're falling in here in Europe, right? It's cost, it's risk assessment, and this is what's killing AI initiatives. And actually, coincidentally, I posted something on LinkedIn yesterday where I went back to the Davenport article on data strategy, where you have offense and defense. This is the defense, right? But defense cannot outweigh the offense. You need to prove the value. And if defense becomes too heavy, you don't get the business support to do that. So again, my point is, the real value is in here. This is what needs to be proven. But if you can automate a fair chunk of those checks, right, by letting agents define templates and do some scoring and so on, they might actually even be better, because not everyone is a native speaker, and this all is in English, right?
Yeah.
Again, there could be really some value in getting most of those things, automated.
And also the knowledge management, Eric. So not only that, but the fact that I'm storing all of my resultant artifacts, my glossaries, my policies, my procedures, everything's coming together. We now have a knowledge base of what work has been done and what's appropriate. But the other point we want to bring up, Eric, is we're trying to get people away from the frameworks, but not disconnected from the framework. So let's get the action going on the project steps, and not all this framework, and let's try to abstract all the frameworks and create a common thing that does everything. That you can go for years, and you can have religious wars on DCAM versus DMBOK versus whatever it is, and you just spend your life there.
And that point, Howard, and to your point, Eric, I mean, you can easily kill any AI initiative with these requirements. Okay, so the whole focus of what we're doing, it's about, you have use cases, okay, and you're considering all these 4,000 OPs. Now, if you decide to do NLP chatbot, there's a subset of this that is important. Okay, if you look at all these OPs now, your risk tolerance will put a focus on some of these. Okay, so how do you pinpoint the requirements? So risk tolerance is a thing. Now, the European AI Act will say, well, if you don't this, you'll go to jail. So the idea is to get a sense of what's red, what is the top thing. And then you look at all of this and you say, well, what's the required maturity? So we've kind of bundled which can be executed with low maturity, higher, what's the required maturity? But then it's about what's your existing capability, and it's all about that. It's all about determining the subset of all of this that is critical to succeed, but also align with your current level of maturity. So it's not about building capability, never. It's about the agility to connect governance requirement with your business objective. What do you need to succeed? And focus on this. So you don't drive on building governance capability, never. You drive on what do you want to do, what's needed to succeed, what's the minimum set that needed to succeed, and you make sure you get the evidence to demonstrate it's been done. And you move from there. And you don't fall into the 95% where it stays a proof of concept.
Ori, I think you've done a great job. Thank you. I know I put you under a lot of pressure. I apologize for that, but thank you.
No, so fun.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Anything? We are now 10 past the hour. Thank you so much for the questions, Eric and Adam. Always nice to hear that. But anybody else? I mean, I know there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to understand, but I think the desperate thing from Mario's point of view of working in this environment for many years is how do we go back to doing things and not getting caught because we haven't done things or we haven't paid attention to the appropriate stuff. And I mean, the lovely thing about the frameworks is that they're giving us good guidance, but we can't do them all. We have to do the ones that are appropriate to us now. And it's helpful to learn. I mean, I find so much value out of reading the ISO 42000 or the NIST AI risk management frame. I get a lot of value out of it, but I can't stay there because I need to execute. Yes, Adam.
And I will say this as well as a more of a cautionary statement. We're going to have those who abide by solid frameworks, solid and ethical frameworks like this, and we are going to have those bad actors that do not.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's just a sad ethical fact.
Yeah.
It can be again, it can be state backed, it can be individual backed.
Yeah.
And that goes, and that cuts across all lines. I wouldn't throw out abuse from the US DoD, for example. I'm sure they're working on their own version of things that have very, very few guidelines and such.
Yeah. And I think, Mari, if I'm correct, you don't force all of the stuff onto them. I mean, you're just helping guide them, you're not enforcing that you have to do it, and if you don't do it, then you can't go forward. I mean, is that correct, Mario? What is your...
Well, yeah, exactly. I mentioned the US DoD. We're working with the Canadian Department of Defense, okay, and they see all these frameworks. You look at all the ISO, and they are submitted, to the NATO guideline on AI, and you consider all the guardrails, all the controls. The idea is allowing the agility to select the component you want and you need from a governance perspective. And then when it's an initiative and you say to the initiative, here's the list of 20 things you need to do, it's about allowing them to say, well, that thing here, I would like a derogation on not to do this. This is quite fundamental. If you're too dogmatic about, you do this or you cannot move forward, it's going to be very challenging to demonstrate the value through time. So you need to have agile mechanism when, if an initiative consider it doesn't have the expertise, they can ask for help. Okay, this agility between governance and an initiative to not be dogmatic is fundamental to the success of the initiative.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful aspect of it, in that realistically, not every AI effort is going to require the same set of guidelines. They're going to be lax on certain aspects. They're going to be very stringent on other aspects.
Yes.
Sure. But the nice thing is we can add in, for example, these are the quality checks you need to do. This is the data management basics you need to do. These are some of the AI techniques, things that you need to do. So one of the things I wanted to show you is, like, for example, when you do anomaly detection and you use a technique called one class SVM, how do you explain, how does the business explain why this claim was considered to be an anomaly? So these are helping people get the action and not tie them up into all sorts of stuff, but it's helping them understand what to do and how to work on it.
And Howard, to your point on that, like with the different fraud techniques, why one aspect was selected over another?
Yeah.
So I think being able to have more guidelines and that are necessary, that would be necessary. You create the framework that has the most extensive guidelines that you might ever need, and may never need some of them, but you can say, we have them here just in case we need them, rather than finding out, we forgot about that, and it caused this, and overlooking that aspect that wasn't considered,
right,
caused an adverse result.
And what Mario is doing as well as he's almost classifying these OPs in terms of crawl, walk, run. So what do we need to do to start crawling? And then how do we progress to start walking and running? So a lot of these things are now, so you don't try to eat that entire framework. You only take what you can do at this point in time.
I have to say, Mario, honestly, I'm very, very impressed with this. I'm really excited about getting to learn, getting some hands-on, and learning this tool that you've got and framework. Very excited about it.
Excellent. Magella, yes. Sorry, Adam. Magella.
Hi, hello.
No.
Hi, Howard.
Hi.
Hi. And Mario. Sorry, but because I missed the previous webinar, family issues. Okay. So I have a question in my head. It's not a question; it's more a comment, and it's about the first slides that Mario showed us about what makes a data project fail, even though it's AI or whatever. And that took me to the first time when I started to work with data, maybe 25 or 30 years ago. And I saw the same slide in different ways, but the same. Data, infrastructure, SMS, something, a process that the company offered, and then the data and all of the infrastructure, pretty, okay? Arranged and beautiful, okay? That slide, even though today it's useful because we have the same mess in data, even though we have many tools, many frameworks, many initiatives, and more knowledge, etc. Okay, and it's a question. It's more a reflection than a question, but with all of those things growing on this time, say like tools, languages, structure, whatever. What do you think, Mario and Howard? All of these models help to resolve that messy data that we have seen over the years. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know if I'm clear.
No. Okay? No, you are clear. Mario, would you like to answer that?
Well, the data being a mess, and we see this. I think the challenge always is finding the right motivation to solve it. It's all about that. You consider data management, data governance challenge throughout time and the mess that exists and the framework. But how do you motivate the organization? How do you, get them to act on that stuff? And I think, in a sense, AI brings this opportunity. Okay, I think in what we're seeing in this context is that AI is seen as a way to deliver business value. So the simple idea here is to piggyback on AI business objective to help to resolve this chaos and mess and say, well, it's not everything that needs to be fixed. Okay, we've got certain business objective, we've got certain AI use case we want to put forward. These are the specific component that we need to address. So I think it's a question of priority lights on what needs to be done. And I think we're working with many organizations where data management feel helpless to bring and drive transformation in the organization. AI brings an opportunity to link required data management transformation to business objective. How do you connect the dots? How can you be lean and connect directly data management capabilities with business objective? I think that's the opportunity. I don't know if that resonate, Maila.
Yeah. Maureen, and what I'd like to share with you is just an experience I had with a central bank I worked at. And it was interesting how at one stage, basically the COO said, we're stopping all of these fancy data projects and stuff like that. And the only one that he was willing to fund were AI projects. Now, for what reason and what he made that out, I don't know, and I'm still not sure that it was the right thing. But what you're saying is so true, is that people are, I suppose, are a little bit tired of being told that they have to do data management because of a regulation and privacy and stuff like that. Now they're saying, well, we want to do data management because it's AI, and AI is going to help us transform the business. So it's a positive angle to why we do it, not a negative angle to we have to do it, and we go into checklist mode of done, report it, send it to the regulator. Thank you very much.
Well, what I see is that still we have a job. Okay, that's fantastic.
Oh yes, oh yes. I think the interesting thing was, and we saw that now, and Mario will attest to this, is that it's not just us, but it's everybody. So the number of times we call for humans to be in the loop, like the anomaly detection. What I've got there is you go through a set of claims and you say, right, these 5 are anomalies. Now I need a human to be able to tell me why they are an anomaly. So I can tell you statistically that they are an anomaly, but you've got to tell me why they're an anomaly, and you've got to tell the customer why you think there's a problem here. So it's amazing. We can do a lot of stuff with AI just to detect it and bring it down, but then it's about working with the data steward or the business SME to help them provide answers.
Yeah. And it's about knowing upfront the topics that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. We working with Immigration Canada. They wanted to automate visa decision requests, and they say, well, that's a good use case. They've inputted the last 10 years of visa requests and the decision that were made, and they trained a model on, what are the parameters to make a good decision. And they were able to demonstrate that the decision made by the system was actually better than the one made by the officer. Now, they were just about to deploy this. And then they got asked, well, if we need to explain the decision to a judge because the decision is being challenged, can we explain the decision? And the answer was no, because the technology that was selected did not support the required explanation. So, they lost a year of investment, not because of AI technology, because these considerations must be understood first. So if they identify, the governance, the explainability requirement up front, okay, and assess the selected AI technology against these requirements, they would have navigated that earlier, and they lost, several $1 million because of this lack of visibility on the governance requirement that were important for that use case.
And Mario, I wanted to show you here this is something I wanted to show the people as I've used several techniques, one class SVM, isolation forest, to detect an anomaly. Now, what I was blown away was I saw these anomalies, but I couldn't look at the normalized data and explain why this is an anomaly and this one is not an anomaly. And so I'm almost in a way I'm becoming over-reliant on the statistical analysis, because I see it's an anomaly. Okay, it's a problem. There's potentially a fraud. Now, how do I know what this is? And then in terms of doing some further analysis, you then are able to say, well, there's something called a score and a distance as to how they create these boundaries. And so the more you understand about the way in which the scoring happens, the better you can interpret the results and explain it to the person on the other side. So these routines are phenomenal, but you can go pretty dumb on it quickly in terms of not knowing why it's telling you that, and you just believe it, and then you're in trouble as well. And that's exactly what you're saying, Mario. Adam?
A couple of things following on that, Howard. I think it's really great that you expanded those two columns. I'm just wondering, couldn't that also be expanded to identify what specific conditions contributed to that being flagged as an anomaly?
Yeah. So
you don't have to go. So you don't have to manually do the digging on it.
I'm just going to 1 moment. Okay.
I did it.
Okay. All right. So there's what came out now when I was looking at this thing is almost and Mario, I'd love for you to show the people, when we got that 10% return, there was some very interesting ideas that came out of that in terms of, where are they battling? Mario, I don't know if you've actually got it. I'll stop sharing, but you had a really nice set of. It explained where the problems were. You showed it to me this morning. Now, Adam, it's interesting because they're saying a lot of the failures are because the Gen AI is being used to deal with the customers and things like that, where it's actually more effective in dealing with internal productivity and in terms of explaining to people how to understand it, what it's saying, and what does it mean. Helping them make decisions, not doing the decisions, but helping them make decisions. And that was fascinating because now you can start saying, well, okay, these are the anomalies that you're getting, and what is the factor that's contributing to it, and why should you not accept this or query this in more detail? So how can we help the insurance agent to explain why the anomaly was detected and how do they identify it and go back to the customer to say, for this and this reason, we have a problem with your claim.
Right. And Howard, your scenario there ties directly with what Mario was saying about the decision making. And I have heard multiple leadership consider AI the be all and end all. It's going to solve all our problems.
Yeah.
And I keep harking on the fact that no, it is just another tool, and a tool has to be used in the proper manner for the proper reason, right?
Yeah.
Tools have an appropriate reason. I always simplify it down to I can hammer a nail in with a wrench, right? Does that mean it's going to be easy? Probably
Yeah.
not. Does that mean it might damage the wrench? Probably. Does it mean it might damage the nail? Probably. Does it might mean it damages the nail so bad I have to pull the nail out and start again?
Yeah.
Possibly, right? Versus
Yeah.
using the correct tool for the correct usage on it. And that AI should never be responsible for any decision making. Decision making, it always has to land at the feet of a human.
Yeah. And so
AI can provide all the results and the assessments and everything, but a human has to decide what is appropriate, because often there's a lack of context.
Yeah. And this is the nice thing. This is where you start to see that humans are now operating at a different level. A lot of the grunt work has been taken away. Now some of the anomalies have been identified, and now they've got to do some work in trying to understand that. And here this is saying the high adoption is they mainly boost individual productivity, not business results. So that's sort of saying that, yeah, the AI is not going to be able to make a great decision, but it can help people understand how to make a good decision and how to get there quicker.
I find it very, very comparable to the old adage that I'm sure you know very well, is the conundrum for data scientists. They spend 80% of their time figuring out what the correct data is versus 20% of their time actually doing the work of a data scientist.
Yeah.
And it's improving that when we implement processes, governance and data quality, et cetera, and we wrap them in and we provide the data scientists with tagged, categorized, itemized, correct, accurate data, they're able to do their job more efficiently.
Right.
And spend less time on the waste.
Right. Mario, anything more from your side? Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I mean, no. I'm looking forward to and what we're building together, Howard. I think will be to you look at the framework, you identify that a subset is needed, and the work that Howard and I are doing is about how do you implement this in a lean way? Again, it's about all the frameworks, all the components can be too much. How do you get to a subset that is relevant for you? So what are the mechanisms to do this? Telling that story, bringing automatism in order to do this is a very relevant need in that space for sure. And you were just showing the reason why initiatives are failing. And again, it's not technology. So how do you identify everything else? That focus is so relevant to enable the success of AI.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mario. Any other questions? Paul Bolton's been very quiet. I know you may see some of this stuff. Anything from your side, Paul?
No, I'm just interested. Very interesting. Thanks. And just appreciate I remember the project you mentioned just now on all the metadata and just saw those screens. It's very interesting that's coming together.
Nice.
There's always a question of how to realize that. that work,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
which is great to see.
Fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Anybody else? I know we're getting pretty late, and Mario, I'm keeping you out of work. I apologize for that. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.